Interesting, and speaking of disclosure, if I may go off topic a little bit here, just for a second, Fox News just released a statement that was put out by the Pentagon 2 days ago, and they had video to go with that statement, that UFOs, triangular-shaped UFOs, have been harassing their warships. And they showed the video, and now the Pentagon is actually admitting that, yes, UFOs exist, and we don't know what they are.
Yeah.
I just want to touch on one point that you brought up about insiders now disclosing some, or reluctantly disclosing some information about the Apollo missions. I've read many books in support of the Apollo missions, and they more than drop hints that there's something not right about this. I've read quotes, for example, from authors who were staunch supporters of the Apollo mission, saying it's amazing that no one was killed. It's amazing that nothing happened. It was amazing that everything worked perfectly. That word amazing comes up amazingly a lot, right?
Exactly.
So that tells me a lot that they're trying to sort of get the message out but not risk their careers, as you said, is a very real possibility. And we're seeing that now. People are being fired and blacklisted because they dare to speak of their political ideology.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a scary environment, a scary world to be in. Thankfully, that is now starting to change because people are becoming aware of what is going on. So it's made it easy for people like you, Marcus, and Scott Henderson and Robin Williams. Oh, by the way, I just want to mention to the readers, when I was talking about we, the Apollo detectives, when we were debating Blue Earth thing, there's a difference between, we call ourselves the Apollo detectives, but it's actually on Neil Peel's YouTube channel. Yeah. Not to confuse that with the Apollo detectives run by Robin Williams. His YouTube channel is called Apollo Detectives. We weren't part of that, so I just wanted to make that distinction between the two.
Quite a few of the Apollo Detectives discussions. There have been 7 so far we've had.
Yeah.
It's about one every 6 months. We tried to coincide them with the launch of a particular Apollo mission. So obviously we started around the time of Apollo 8, I think we started. And we did a very interesting one on Apollo 13. They last 2 to 3 hours, so it's a sort of free-flowing discussion. Some of it's not relevant, some of it is. We've got people on there, about 5 or 6 people, maybe more, who appear regularly, who have a considerable body of knowledge. I would say I'm very willing to debate in public, like you are, with anybody, because I've yet to be asked a question about Apollo that I can't answer. So there's a challenge for all you NASA supporters, NASA proponents, NASA guys. Amy, I'm speaking to you. Now, if it ever becomes public knowledge that the Apollo missions were not as advertised, i.e. they were faked, fraud and fabricated.
Yeah.
If that ever becomes public knowledge, there's a real problem then. And this is why it probably will never happen. Because if the American government, in the guise of NASA, have lied about something as seminal as the landing on the moon, what else have they lied about? And that is a question that cannot possibly be asked. So it may never happen that it will be officially acknowledged that Apollo was a fake. How it will get acknowledged is quite amusing, because NASA are now trying to return to the moon. I say return in inverted commas because they never went in the first place. If they cannot get back to the moon by 2024, just to orbit the moon, not necessarily to land, that's going to take a bit longer probably because they haven't got the lander yet. They haven't tested it, they haven't got anybody trained for it. So let's say they're just going to orbit the moon. If they orbit the moon, they have to go through the Van Allen belts and into the radiation environment beyond the Van Allen belts, and they have to remain in the vacuum of space at lunar orbit, 240,000 miles out. So they have to have equipment that is powerful enough and well designed enough to withstand that environment. I don't think they've got it. There's nobody working at NASA now who was working at NASA during the time of Apollo. They've all retired, or moved on, or passed on. So all the people at NASA now, and I'm speaking to you people at NASA, you joined NASA because of your enthusiasm for space travel, probably based on the Apollo missions. Very enthusiastic about it. You love space travel. Of course you work at NASA. You probably work at SpaceX and Blue Origin and Dynetics and all the other companies in space travel activity. But have a look at the previous record, because if you cannot get information about how the Apollo mission succeeded, And believe me, you won't, because it doesn't exist. As Randy has explained in considerable detail, the telemetry tapes have gone, plans maybe on microfiche, but they're hard to read. We can't recreate the technology of the 1960s. We probably don't want to. What we can't also do is what that technology allegedly did. And you mentioned the Apollo guidance computer, which was developed originally by MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It was basically miniaturized into something the size of a shoebox. If it did what we're told it did, at that size, at that time, late 60s, it was a remarkable achievement. But did it? There have been several computer scientists, specifically a guy who goes by the name of Hunchbacked on YouTube, who knows about computers. He can read computer diagrams. And he said, this thing wouldn't work. It couldn't work. Look, this connection here, that connection there. Why do you have that? So he's actually examined the whole Apollo guidance computer story and says it wouldn't work. It couldn't work. And this is why, and he explains why. He's meticulous in his research. So there are computer scientists out there honest enough to say it's not working. So all you other guys working for these space companies, SpaceX, Blue Origin, Dynetics, all the other guys, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, there are plenty of them around, look at the data on Apollo and see if it makes any sense to you, because that is your blueprint for getting back to the moon. If you find it is incomprehensible, if you find it can't work, you have got a problem now to work out how to do it with 21st century technology. It should be a piece of cake. It should be simple to do.
I just want to touch on that one point, because I've actually heard an answer back from the NASA proponents on this, is that, well, we can't back engineer because even though we have some diagrams and some schematics, so on and so forth, the engineers have thrown or destroyed their personal notes. I mean, they have an answer for everything. I mean, really, take the damn engine and pick it apart, reverse engineer it.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need personal notes to do that. You don't need their personal handwritten notes to do that. You're an engineer, you're intelligent, okay? Put all that training and back engineer this engine. I don't understand the logic. See, there's no logic here.
No, there isn't.
There's no logic at all.
No, none at all.
Right? And it gets to the point where I just back off, because they're not listening to logic.
No.
Right? Take the engine, back engineer it, and you should have no problems figuring out how this engine works, run tests, and start doing trial runs with it, and get it up and working. And actually, apparently, I guess they said they were trying to do that, and then they gave up on it.
Yeah.
Right? Don't go by what NASA's words are, go by their actions.
Yes, good point. Go by what they did. If those F1 engines did not produce the power that was claimed for them, 1.5 million pounds of thrust each, 600 tons, if it didn't do that, as you said in your first book, the Apollo mission couldn't have succeeded. It wasn't going fast enough. The film that you quote, I forget the name of the man who shot it. It was an IBM engineer, I think it was.
Yes.
He shot a Super 8 film of the launch of Apollo 11. No edits, no cuts. He just panned his camera up, followed the rocket as it took off, and at 30,000 feet, the rocket punched through the cloud. We know it's 30,000 feet because that's the particular cloud that occurs at that level.
Yeah.
So from launch to that particular point should have taken a particular time. It actually took much longer to get from launch to the punch through of the cloud than it should have done, because the rocket wasn't going fast enough, because it didn't have enough power. So if it wasn't going fast enough, it couldn't get into low Earth orbit at the altitude it was supposed to get into. And that brings us back possibly to the most mysterious launch of all, Apollo 13. How many people even know that an Apollo command module was recovered from the Atlantic Ocean the day after the official launch of Apollo 13? That was April the 11th, 1970. The Soviet Navy were on exercises. It was publicly known about. There was nothing mysterious about it. They were on exercises in the Bay of Biscay, which is off the coast of France and Spain, about 2,000 miles from Florida. And from the ocean, they recovered an Apollo command module, which they took back with them on their fishing boats, the famous spy ships, to Murmansk, which is where the Atlantic Fleet was based. And they handed it back to America 6 months later, September 1970. They handed it back to the US Coast Guard cutter, the South Wind, which was visiting on a recreation visit to Murmansk. Now, obviously, this is not secret. People are fully aware of this, and it was reported at the time in the Stars and Stripes,
Yeah.
US military publication. They reported the handover. Now, at this point, NASA and its supporters may say, yeah, yes, they did recover it. It was a boilerplate command module, boilerplate 1227.
Yeah.
Now, a boilerplate command module is basically one that is not going to get launched into space. It's one that's used for practice.
It's like a dummy command module.
Sort of dummy.
Yeah.
It didn't have all the stuff inside that a real command module would have. That's what they'll say it is. And it was used to practice when the capsule was dropped into the ocean. You know, they had to get the astronauts out and
Yeah.
they had to practice doing it. Obviously, it's a reasonable thing to do. The point about that is that may well be the case. But that command module, boilerplate or real, was not reported as being missing until after the Russians had recovered it and announced it. So, don't you think something the size of an Apollo command module falling off the side of a ship or drifting away from somewhere in Florida might have been noticed? And they might have said, hello, oh, it fell off the ship. Oh dear, it's drifted away. Somebody will find it. Just give it back. How long would it take to drift from Florida to the Bay of Biscay? It's about 2,000 miles. And the currents go north from Florida. That's the Gulf Stream. It goes north. It goes up towards Greenland, across to Britain, down the coast of France, and into the Bay of Biscay. It takes about 6 weeks to do that. This command module, recovered by the Soviet Navy, had no marine growth on it.
You can actually see that in the photos. I mean, they have actual photos. I've seen those photos. I of course, wrote about it in book 2. But those photos show absolutely no marine growth whatsoever on that capsule.
The Bay of Biscay is nowhere near the launch trajectory of a rocket taking off.
It's way north.
It's way north. So did the official Apollo 13 rocket malfunction and the command module ditched in the Atlantic just fairly soon after launch? It could have happened. But obviously that wasn't what we were told happened. We were told it went on the way to the moon, it had an oxygen tank exploded. An oxygen tank exploded. Newton's first law here, everything will remain in motion until acted upon by another force. Another force would be an explosion of an oxygen tank. It's quite a big explosion. Blew the side of the craft off. So don't you think that might have sent it a bit off course?
Yeah, of course. You would think Newton's law would take effect here. I mean, they depict that, of course, in Ron Howard's movie with the thrusters firing and it's, zigzagging here and there.
You still have to know where they are and where they want to get to. If they haven't got a computer that can tell them where they are, how did they get there?
And not only that, but that gets back into navigation because they were using the stars to navigate. And even the official narrative says that they were having trouble differentiating the stars from the particles that were being released from the explosion. That, for me, is sort of telling me that NASA's saying, hey, you know what, we're basically just having fun here. They're screwing with people. I mean, come on. You're actually telling people that you have problems navigating on the way to the moon and back. Yeah. It's almost as if they're putting that there to see if people are actually going to get it. It took us a little while, but we got it. One more thing I want to add to that discussion here on the Apollo 13 command module or boilerplate that was found in I think it was the Sea of Biscay, was it?
Bay of Biscay.
There was a nuclear-powered submarine lurking in the North Atlantic the day of the Apollo 13 launch.
Yeah.
And I'm beginning to speculate now that there is a Russian submarine lurking there on every launch because they obviously had some intel telling them that the F-1 engines were not performing to specifications. So they were anticipating an abort. And it makes me wonder how many other aborts have there been that we don't know about regarding the Saturn V rocket. And then there's the nuclear-powered submarine incident in the Bay of Biscay. And that looks like now that was probably a ruse to throw off American warships or American and intel ships that were in that area. And there was a lot going on, and I know that a good report about it was written on the honest.com website, and they go through it in detail, and I did put that in the book because I thought it was a very riveting story. And what's really interesting about this is that there is absolute concrete evidence. As you just said yourself, the media, Stars and Stripes, and some local media at that time had reported this capsule being found by Russian naval forces, and that there was an official handing back in Murmansk of the capsule to it involved the U.S. Embassy was involved in this. There was U.S. Coast Guard that was involved in picking it up. There's actual photos of this. You see the photos of them transferring the capsule to the U.S. Coast Guard. I mean, it's very interesting. The photos are there.
Russian sailors are there. You know, Murmansk is a bit chilly.
There is absolute substantial proof, and that has never really been officially dealt with.
No, it
is how did that capsule, as you say, it fell off the boat near Florida and somehow worked its way up, sailed across to the Bay of Biscay.
Yeah.
I mean, the other question is, could it have even floated that long? I mean, I don't know. Who knows the condition of this boilerplate when it supposedly fell off the ship, but that's never been addressed. That's never been speculated upon at all by officials. They never even talked about that. They just say they found it and they handed it back, and it's left up to everybody else to figure out, fill in the missing pieces.
So, here's the question. Where is it now? Where is that boilerplate capsule from Apollo 13? Where is it now? And where is the official Apollo 13 command module? The official command module is on display at the Kansas Cosmodrome. The boilerplate is on display in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So why can't we look inside it and see what it was like? Because it's been sealed until 2076, the 300th anniversary of the founding of America. Why? It's the only capsule that's been sealed.
Isn't that interesting?
So anybody in Michigan, go and look at the Grand Rapids Museum, and it's outside. It's a sort of white cone-shaped thing, but you can't see inside it. They don't even leave one of the windows open.
The boilerplate, where it's positioned in front of the building, it's not symmetric. It just doesn't blend in with the structure, the building structure, the grounds. The contrast between before and after is incredible. So there's a message there.
Why isn't it on display inside the museum or in an air and space museum?
I like your first question too. Like, why is it locked? Why is it sealed?
Yeah.
What's inside?
Yeah, what's inside?
Very good question.
Because obviously the Russians, when they recovered it, would have had a good look inside it, because it took 6 months to get it back to Murmansk and hand it back. It was found in April, it's handed back in September. Plenty of time to look inside it.
Why a boilerplate? Why, of all things, is a boilerplate command module on display at Grand Rapids, Michigan, with something inside that has been sealed? What's so important about that particular boilerplate and not the actual command module Apollo 13, which supposedly went through this event, and wow, they got the astronauts back? That would be the one to pick. But no, they pick a boilerplate. That's very interesting.
Oh, maybe we'll find out one day. It's yet another of those unanswered questions.
I think we may find out even sooner. The way politics are going right now, things are moving very quickly.
Yes, they are.